Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and I'm going to talk today about some biblical issues. So we are getting back to Easter eventually. Sure, I did some cooking, talked about things that were not especially biblical, but we're still in that Easter season, the journey towards Pentecost, and so let's get into it. Now, today, when this airs, I will be giving my last class for my students at the international seminary that I teach at. And I've been talking about the Babylonian Exile, or kind of getting to it. That is, we've been talking about the kings of Israel and Judah, and we've been getting there slowly. We started with Saul, then David, then Solomon. We moved all the way through to Josiah, and then to Josiah's sons, and finally to the conquest of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar II. Interestingly, there was a Nebuchadnezzar I. We never hear about him. We only ever hear about Nebuchadnezzar II, who conquered Jerusalem, took away some of the royalty, some of the scribes, and then left a king in place who rebelled again, and so he had to come back and defeat them and take them away, and then he left a governor in place who was murdered, and the people rebelled, and so Nebuchadnezzar came back yet again, 3 different times, deported all the royalty, all the scribes, all the important people at the top to Babylon. Now, when I was a young sprout at Oxford University, I thought that the key time in the history of Israel and Judah was the monarchies of David and Solomon. Wrong. They have been seriously disputed in recent years by archaeological work done by people like Israel Finkelstein and William Dever and so forth. They've all uncovered an awful lot about the early monarchy, or kind of the, I don't know how you want to put it, like the problems with considering the truth of the biblical history. But when we get down to Josiah and the exile, then things get real. And here's the thing: the exile, which I thought of as a 18-year-old theology student as, more or less, not important, is the important time. And here's the reason. Up to that point, the religion of Israel was based on sacrifice. You went to the temple if you had sinned with a lamb or a dove or whatever, a loaf of bread. You sacrificed it, and everything was forgiven. And then the exile happened. The temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. He couldn't sacrifice. couldn't sacrifice because the temple was destroyed and because they didn't live in Judah anymore. They lived in Babylon. So what were they going to do? They were going to read the scriptures. They were going to interpret the scriptures. They were going to understand writing. Writing became supremely important. Much, 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 much more important than sacrifice. And so Judaism was born. And in a sense, that's how Christianity was ultimately formed, based on writing, based on the knowledge of things that had been written, not based on sacrifice, not based on putting a lamb on an altar and slitting its throat and burning it. Very, very important, which an 18-year-old Oxford undergraduate could not even remotely understand. But here's what I want to point out to you. The big villain of the piece was Babylon. Babylon had conquered Judah, conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, taken everybody away, and so it was the big villain. And it remains the big villain even after it's gone. The Persians conquered the Babylonians around, I don't remember, I think 550, something like that. And Cyrus the Great said, okay, you can go back to Jerusalem, you can do your thing. And some people went back and some people didn't. A lot of the Judeans stayed in Babylon and they started writing about the scriptures. They wrote the Midrash and the Talmud and all the commentaries that are still being used in Judaism to this day. And some went back to Jerusalem. And they always thought Babylon is the great enemy. So we get to the book of Revelation, the apocalypse written by one of the Johannine disciples, who knows, supposedly the apocalypse of St. John the Divine, but who knows. And who's the villain? It's Babylon. But it's not really Babylon. He's talking in cryptic terms. He's talking in a secret language, because the real villain, as far as the book of Revelation is concerned, is Rome. You'll read the book of Revelation carefully and you'll find that he talks about 7 hills. Well, what city is built on 7 hills? It's not Babylon. Babylon is in the plain of Chaldea. It's Rome. The book of Revelation is talking about the city of Rome. But it uses Babylon as its metaphor. And we still use that. We still talk about Babylon. We talk about the whore of Babylon. We talk about Babylon when we are talking about pornography or when we're talking about sinfulness in general. Babylon is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. The closest we can come to that is Baghdad or Iran and Iraq. I don't know when people are going to wake up, when people are going to understand that Babylon is not literally our enemy anymore. So what is our enemy? Okay, that's another video entirely. So for the moment, if you like my videos, please like, please subscribe, and I will see you on Tuesday. I think I'm probably going to just do some cooking or something really banal because these kinds of subjects get very detailed and very complicated very quickly. Have a great weekend.